Okay, well, hello, my name is Sue Kelso. I'm with Good Heart Artist Residencies, and I'm coming to you from Good Heart, which is a wonderful 12 degrees today with a expected high of 14 degrees, just balmy. So anyway, wherever you may be watching this, I hope that you are sitting back and cozy and enjoy this conversation between Michelle Boyer, who's a volunteer and board member here, and Scott Dorsch, our soon-to-be writer in residence in Good Heart. So anyway, good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Sue. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Glad to meet you here by Zoom. Um, I'm going to read your little bio here. So Scott will be in residence here in Good Heart from February 18th to March 4th, 2021. And he was born in Georgia, raised in Michigan, and he is currently living in Idaho. He is an MFA creative writing candidate and Writing in the Wild fellow at the University of Idaho. His fiction has appeared in the Midwestern Gothic. And beyond writing, he's a gardener, musician, certified wildlife tracker, and he has a rock climbing obsession. So Michelle Boyer. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Sue.
Michelle is a retired middle grades teacher. She volunteers at Cricketry Art Center in Petoskey. She volunteers with Harbor Springs Festival of the Book, as well as all the wonderful work that you do, Michelle, for Good Heart Artist Residency. And as she puts it, she dabbles in writing. I should also add that she's an outdoor enthusiast and one of the best pie bakers that I know. So thank you for doing this today, Michelle. So what I'm going to do is turn over this interview or conversation over to Michelle and let her get it started.
Thanks, Sue. Looking forward to talking more with you, Scott. And for those of you listening in, don't turn off early because he's going to share some of his writing at the end, but I'm going to put that out there first so you know that's coming. Scott, I'm curious as to how you learned about the Good Heart Artist Residency.
Yeah, I believe I found it on the Poets and Writers website. I was searching on their database for conferences and residencies, and in particular in Michigan. I really wanted to come here for residency, so yeah, I believe that's where I found it, and it's still there. I saw the other day. So
we're glad to know those posts are helping to get the word out. And speaking about Michigan, I know you have some connections to Michigan. Can you tell us a little bit about what those connections are and maybe a favorite place or a part of Michigan that speaks to you?
Sure, absolutely. I was born in Georgia, but I basically lived in Michigan since I was 5 years old. We moved up to Muskegon, Michigan, and I lived there until I graduated high school. And then I moved up to Marquette, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. And at least for a 3-year span there, I was in Marquette and then came back. So combined, probably like 20 years of my life have been in Michigan. And I love it. I don't know what exactly my favorite part, but being out west, the thing I miss the most is the lakes, both Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. Both for different reasons. I can actually swim in Lake Michigan for part of the year. Lake Superior, it's like there's like 1 week maybe that's like it feels like you can stay in it for more than a few minutes. But I think the lakes is what are my favorite part and what I miss the most having left in the last few years.
I was in Good Heart recently in Salt Lake, Michigan, so you're going to be so excited to see how it looks this time of the year. How does your connection to Michigan, how does that impact your writing, or has it?
Yeah, in particular, my novel, it is set in Michigan, and it's in particular on the shore of Lake Michigan, in the dunes. But a lot of my short work and short fiction has mostly been centered in the West, which is really strange. I've spent most of my 20s in Montana, Oregon, and Washington State. So a lot of my short work has been mostly influenced by the West, but my first novel that I'm working on is kind of a Bill Dogg's Roman or coming of age tale. And I've heard from someone, and I think this is true now, that your first book is kind of accumulation of your entire life. So you've been working on it since you were one. So I'd say I've had like 32 years of experience going into this novel, and all of that early life is of Michigan. And so it only made sense for me to set my novel in Michigan. in particular the dunes, which I grew up just 10 minutes from Muskegon State Park, which if you haven't been, I know some of your board members are from Grand Rapids, so I'm sure they've been, but it's some of the most beautiful beach in the world, I think. And it was actually where snowboarding was invented, believe it or not, on the dunes. So I think I took it for granted, but I think that that closeness to wilderness, in particular the dunes, growing up has always affected me and imbued my writing sense.
You know, talking about those dunes makes me think of the short story that I believe you're basing your novel from, that short story, Holes or Tunnels.
Yeah.
The descriptive narrative is just vivid. It's beautiful. I want to share just an example of that. The dunescape around the lake shore is a minefield of holes or tunnels, dark, empty, and endless as spilled ink with no stars. We call them witches' holes or tunnels. Can you share with us sort of your inspiration for that story? It sounds like it's maybe the dunes on the western coast, but I'm also interested in how you can take what you started with that short story and just develop it into a whole novel. That fascinates me. How are you doing that?
Oh, it's still fascinating me, but it's difficult, but yeah, that short story was one of the first I've written, and was successful, and very happy that Midwestern Gothic gave it a chance. But it it kind of was it's funny more than anything. It started from my experience in the Oregon dunes, of all places, where I was learning wildlife tracking with Alderleaf Wilderness College. We went there as a field trip and spent a week learning how to track in the dunes, which is one of the easiest places to learn, right? I mean, every step you take is tracked until it gets blown away by the wind. So it was a wonderful place to learn. But they had what I've very recently learned, that Ken Kesey called devil's smokestacks. And they're little holes that are in the dunes there. And I learned about them then, and I thought that maybe those also existed in the dunes I grew up in Michigan. And did a little bit of research, because they're just super creepy. I mean, it was like we would go out at night and they're like, hey, watch your step, you could fall into these things and maybe get buried, and at the time they didn't really know what they were. I mean, other than colloquially, they didn't really have a definition for them, or how they were created. But I was doing some research and found a Smithsonian article, and it was based in Mount Baldy, Indiana, which is a big dune system and national park there. But Mount Baldy is a big traveling or wandering. They call it a living dune. It's always moving, I think further south every year. But it has these holes in it that a 6-year-old actually fell into, a boy. And he was trapped in there for, I think, about 3 hours. It was only 11-foot hole, but you can imagine with the sand, how it's not easy to get out of. But he's fine now, 4 years later, I just learned, which is good. But he was found in a catatonic state afterwards. And anyway, they've done research since, because they were worried they had to shut down the park for a while. And this kind of just, fiction is conflict, right? That's what it comes from. And so that just stuck with me, how frightening that would be, for one, but also thinking about growing up and how that could have happened to me. And or anyone really. And so it's kind of interesting. But so that short story is basically extrapolated from there. What if these holes were bottomless? What if they weren't just 10 feet deep? What if they were taking over the town? And so that was sort of where my head went and where that short story came from.
I'll be anxious to see how it progresses into your novel. It almost has a sort of a extraterrestrial sort of a feel to it. So that will be interesting to see. So very interesting. Thinking about that, and in that story, I'm wondering, holes and tunnels, are they the same thing or are they different?
So that's one of the philosophical questions that the little 12-year-old boy is having as he's learning, as he's kind of dealing with this change in his home, and part of that is his sister, and that's one of the big this happens right away in the novel, so it's not giving anything away, and it's in the short story as well, but his older sister goes missing, and is likely due to having fallen in one of these holes. And so it's kind of, it's a little bit of a questionary or quandary of hope. If they're a hole, and this is, I'm just trying to I was trying to think of a 12-year-old, like a hole is something that you can't get out of. It feels like it's something that's endless, whereas a tunnel leads to somewhere. And so to him, he's constantly saying hole or tunnel and doesn't want to make the distinction because he wants to believe that a tunnel is something his sister can come back out of, if that makes sense. So it was kind of a weird quandary that I kept asking myself what the differences are. I don't know if there is a deep philosophical difference between a hole or tunnel, but that's how Lucas, the little boy, thinks of it. And yeah, so I guess it's a little bit of hope is kind of where that comes from.
Yeah, as I listen to you, I hear that hope in it, and I wasn't sure if that's where you were going with that before, but I like that sense of hope. And in our world today, and your generation being younger than my generation, you deal with what you call solistep, solastagia. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Solastagia.
Yeah.
For those of you that may not know what that is, I've been informed it's a form of emotional distress or distress caused by environmental change. And for our listeners more in my range, you know, we've had our stressors in life that we've dealt with when we were younger, but our younger generation, their sense of where the world is headed in the environmental world has a huge impact on their lives. So, Scott, I wondered if you could talk with us just a little bit about how your writing is reflective of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And solastalgia is something that I've kind of studied recently in the last few years. At University of Idaho, we have a really great ecocriticism established here. That's a lot of what the literature professors study. Jen Ladino in particular is who brought this term up to me, and it makes so much sense. And Sue was talking earlier with us, and it's something that we all have experienced, and to get finally given a word for it gives it something we can grab onto. But Glenn Albrecht is an Australian philosopher that coined the term, I think in the early 2000s. But the way I like, and this is how he describes it, because it's based on nostalgia, which is basically homesickness you feel when you're away from home. And solastalgia is different because it's a homesickness you feel while you're still at home. And so it's that feeling, and like you said, that environmental change that we're feeling. We are home, but we're feeling sick for a home that we used to have. And so, yeah, like you said, I mean, in my generation too, we've also have, you know, we're still doing things that are changing our environment currently. But it's a weird feeling, right? And I think that's part of what I'm getting, that anxiety especially, is what some of my characters feel, and especially Wade Prussick, who is more my age in the novel, and is seeing these things, and he also feels the anxiety when he sees, you know, during tourist season or something like that we can understand how different our towns feel when a bunch of people come and then leave, and then, you know, whether you know, how they change the environment from that. If you're really in tune with the wildlife there, once it's tourist season and beach season, you no longer see you know, the deer coming along the beach during certain times, or you no longer see foxes coming as close, things like that. So I mean, it can, you know, that environmental stress can be just like, you know, the anxiety of massive holes dismantling your town. And that anxiety is maybe similar to what people are experiencing in, you know, the South with mountaintop removal or the tar sands areas, places where we could see our environment changing by the day drastically. And so, yeah, so I think that anxiety and stress is a big part of what my characters are feeling, and is kind of causes maybe some of the issues that come up as well in that novel.
Well, we can relate to that feeling of what happens during tourist season that doesn't happen this time of the year when it's 12 degrees outside. That's very interesting, Scott. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also interested to know how your many, many interests, gardening, musician, birder, rock climber, wildlife tracker, I can see some of those in this short piece that we've been talking about a little bit, but how much do you draw upon those interests, and how does that appear in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite thing about writing. And I mean, to my dismay, as you know, in my 20s, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I had so many interests. And writing is that place where you can write about whatever you want. And, you know, especially in short fiction, you can have a short story about rock climbing once or about a farmer in the next one. And in novels too, right? All your characters can take on these different traits. So I think that's in a big way. My characters tend to take on some of these skills and or just interests. Rock climbing hasn't really made it into any yet, but in particular, gardening and birding and wildlife tracking, they're all, to me, they're all based in some form of observation. And to me, that's what a writer is always doing and trying to relay to the reader is some form of observations. And it wasn't until I learned birding, bird language, and wildlife tracking that I feel like I became a better writer and learned how specificity I can actually paint a more vivid picture. And that all starts from being just aware of what's happening around you as much as you can. And so I think like, you know, I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, but I think that they both, you know, like you know, tracking does make it into my thing, to my novel because one of them is really interested in wildlife tracking and that's what he does. But it's also just based on, you know, what I'm always observing or trying to observe around me. And that's, it just happened. My characters just happen to do the same. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I think with music, you know, I've been a drummer most of my life. So language in particular has always interested me more from the way it sounds. And so even in that passage you read, even though it's imagery, like I'm mostly excited about how things sound when it comes to writing, and sometimes to you know, to the detriment of content or like or plot points and so forth. So I think maybe that's how music works in. But yeah, so in a lot of different ways I'm influenced by my interest. And thank goodness writing allows you to do whatever you want, especially fiction.
So you're choosing to write a story right now, a novel, short stories. I know you've done some poetry writing as well. So in your writing process, which does come first, the plot or the place, and how does that impact what you choose to work on as a writer?
Yeah, place for sure. And this is something that's always been weird to me is that plot is often hardest for me. Um, and yeah, place is absolutely, I have to have the stage first. And often my characters are born of that setting first. You know, I want to write a story in the Beartooth Valley of Montana, and that's what I think about first. And I get into that place and then the characters that come from there. So um yeah, I think that's where my biggest interest lies. And I know that you can't have and of course I'm interested in character, right? It's blasphemy to be a fiction writer not be interested in character because I am. I think to me the setting has to be the strongest point at first. I think it's I'm trying to remember her name, but it's the book is Writing Fiction. But she said that, you know, you need your characters need an atmosphere to breathe in order to live and to act, right? And so that's always, I mean, I've really stuck onto that and was like, I have to have the living space around it, around these characters first. And so yeah, I guess to me that's why it has to be Michigan first, or it has to be Montana first, and then I can come up with a plot for after that.
So the Good Heart Artist Residency, a big part of the residency is experiencing place. And it's going to be winter. It's going to be a quieter spot than during the time all the tourists are there, but there's still so much life and so much going on in the area. How do you hope that the place of being at the residency will inspire you during your residency period?
I'm so excited in so many ways to be there. I mean, it's so much more than just than having 2 weeks to write, which is amazing. And being a grad student, I like that just never happens. You know, you think you go to grad school to write, but it's like you do everything but write for 3 years. So I mean, of course, I'm excited for that opportunity, but I'm really looking forward to my field trips to Sturgeon Bay, to Petoskey State Park, and getting out and skiing in the morning. And because so much, like I was just saying, so much of what I write is based in place, and it's so much about the wildlife and the things that are happening around the characters as much as what's happening in the relationships. And I need the input. I've been in Idaho for the last 3 years, getting my MFA, and I haven't been able to, especially because of COVID, I haven't been to Michigan in over a year and a half, and I'm just like, I'm running out of input, and even though I'm reading great Michigan writers, old Hemingway or Jim Harrison, etc., David Means, but it's not the same. I need to be there and get more inspiration, I think. And to me, that's the winter's maybe the best time to do that. I love the winter in Michigan, and where I was just talking to y'all before this about it. Like I just so jealous that y'all get to just go skiing out your back doors. It's just not something we get to do here all the time in Idaho. But it's, yeah. So in a lot of ways, Good Heart, I was ecstatic to get the opportunity to be able to write, but just so excited to be able to be in Michigan, and get the opportunity to just experience the world again, for a bit.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to having you in Good Heart. And I think you're going to be every bit as satisfied and excited by your time here as you're expecting to. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I ask you to read from some of your work for us?
I don't think so. No. I just thank you all for this time, and for having me, and for the great opportunity. I'm excited to be there.
Well, thank you, Scott. And we'd like to close with a chance to listen to you reading some of your work.
Absolutely. Sure. So this is a short segment from my novel. My novel is polyphonic. It's from many different voices. And so this is from Lucas, who's a little boy, who's also the same narrator in the short story Holes or Tunnels. So here's just a bit from this chapter called Before. It was a year ago today, right? August 13th, 1998. Today's the 12th, so almost. The summer before 7th grade. On the day the hole or tunnel took out Dad's garden, I remember being shirtless, taking in the last of the sun's heat, watching the birds while Mom watched the news. I could hear the TV sirens, the big blast of commercials, and Mom grumbling over headlines. Another one, Lucas. Can you believe it? Another house was taken, she'd say, or something like that. Another kid, Lucas, you believe it? Or just under her breath, she thought I couldn't hear it. God damn, she'd say. I was standing on the back porch waiting on Barrel Roll with my dog Sandy, who was lying against me as he does, always a little too close, his cold nose and hot breath heavy on my ankles. His fur felt too warm on my leg in the sun. With binoculars, I watched an armload of blackbirds and house finches, Hemorhaus mexicanus, the striped ones who looked like bellies. Their bellies were quickly dipped in red, picking at Dad's garden. The bed had long gone to tall white and yellow and white flowered weeds. Mom stopped looking after it. So did Annie and I after he fell. The finches gripped the long stems of a plant I don't know, pointy and dry anyway, and twisted their heads studying me. They reminded me of the raptors in that kitchen scene in the movies. Makes sense. Lizards and dinosaurs are distant ancestors of birds, Dad said. After identifying the starlings, common, Sturnus vulgaris, I thumped down my Sibley Guide to Birds of North America and surveyed the fence and low boughs of the fir trees, looking for Barrel Roll. It was nearly dusk and well past his curfew. Any minute now, I thought. I named him Barrel Roll after Annie's space game. It's how he moved, a maneuver I'd seen him do once, where he'd spin sideways, wing over wing. Barrel Roll was a small ghost of a bird, an owl, pillow white with copper wings and narrow black eyes. He'd swoop in silent as a comet and carry off a cricket or vole, rabbit kits at times, morning and night. He was my age. He cracked the same year I cracked, Dad said. He found him in a nearby tree. He was no bigger than a snowball. That's what he wanted to call him, Snowball. Dad and I would wait for him on weekend mornings while Mom and Annie slept in. I'd sit in his lap, staying as still as possible with my old Fisher-Price field glasses to my eyes. Keep still, he'd say. They know you're watching. He'd sip his coffee and whisper, naming the birds by ear as they woke with the sun. He knew them all, at least in Michigan. He was a biologist, a frog specialist, but always loved birds. Who's that singing, he'd ask. Cheer, 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 cheer. Who is that, buddy? Cardinal, his favorite. On the morning he fell at the beach, he leaned in as if to tell a secret. Isn't it beautiful to think this dawn chorus started in the South Pole and traveled all the way up here to you and me? It's a big wheel of song, he whispered. Isn't that something? I could see it then and now like a big vision, chirps and songs, greetings and companion calls, circling the globe for eternity, beginning and ending with the moving eye of the sun. Songbirds like waves crashing forward, then lapping back to their own time zones as the darkness of space took the sky. Can you see it? The sun was about a fist distance from the horizon and barrel roll was a no-show. I was about to turn in and eat some breakfast cereal when Sandy leapt up, knocking my knees in. He lifted his golden heckles from tail to ear and gut growled. The earth gut growled back. The starlings and finches lifted off the yard in a cloud. Dad's weed bed began to sway as if by a sudden breeze, then a hard and soft pops of knuckles and spine, a thick Sharpie line cut through the flower bed. Blocks of dirt shifted, knocked shoulders, then took the clusters of his leftover potatoes down a shaft like a throat. I reflexed, yelled for Dad. Mom came running with an unlit cigarette flapping between her lips. Shit, she said. Are you okay? Shit. I reached for her. Her cheeks were cold from morning chill. Sandy barked and scratched at the ground, ready to kill or play with whatever roared out there. Mom and I stood there taking in the hole or tunnel through the window, the fence line peeling back like the thin spine of sardines. And down it went. The neighbor's lights switched on. I'd seen holes before, but not in my backyard. It seemed to take up all the light left in the day and swallowed it in the earth. The floor rumbled as the hole or tunnel crept deeper and deeper. Shit, Mom said again, hushed this time. She let go of my shoulder and made a phone call. Orange vests were over within an hour, the roping off of the hole or tunnel.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear this whole story and read the whole book. So you need to get yourself to Northern Michigan and get writing. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Scott. That's just wonderful writing. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it.
Thank you, both of you, Scott and Michelle. I really appreciate you having this conversation. You talked about place, and with Good Heart Artist Residency, art, place, and community are our pillars. And our jurors, when they review applications, which you should feel good because there were a lot of applicants to the program, and they obviously loved your work that they selected you. But I think that they really could see that you would benefit from your time here in Michigan and in the writing of your novel. So you're a great fit, and I think it'll be wonderful to have you here too. So, and when I say the residency program, it is a community supported program. Our donors, our volunteers, a lot of them come from the local community here, and we're very grateful for that. And then we also get monies from Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network. So we are grateful for all of that. So thank you again, both of you.